To our webinar. I am Abram Kielsmeyer-Jones. This is Translation Notes. We are moving into a new passage today, Mark 14:43 through 52. We will review, we will review the passage from last week, starting with the very last verse, verse 42. And we'll go from there into new material today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you are joining us live, which of course, if you're hearing this right now, you are. We're also recording this, but if you're joining us live, you can use the chat feature to type in any questions or comments you have at any time. It's actually the questions box, and it's a one-way typed chat that you can use. Pardon me. It's a one-way type chat. I will see your question or your comment. I'll either respond individually or I'll anonymize your question and share it with the whole group if that makes sense to do. The handout that you see on my screen is available to you in the Go to Webinar Control Panel. There's a handout section there, so just click the triangle, make sure it's pointed down, and it will show a link to the PDF. You can also get the handout at tinyurl.com/marktranslationnotes. I mentioned that we are recording today. So if you're watching this on a recording, you can go to the tiny URL to access the handout. You can also email me at abramkj@accordancebible.com. I think that covers it for logistics. Let me know if you've got comments or questions as we get started, and otherwise we will begin with review. We spent several weeks on Mark 14:30. Excuse me a second. Okay, sorry about that. Got a sudden onset of sore throat, so I don't know what's going on there. Mark 14:37 through 42 is what we did the last few times. And let's just read that passage so that we can be caught up on what's happening today. It says, "Then Jesus came and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, 'Simon, are you sleeping? Couldn't you watch for 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you do not give in to temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.' And again he went out and prayed, saying the same thing. And again he returned and found them sleeping, for their eyes were weighed down, and they did not know how to answer him. And he came a third time and said to them, 'Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough of this. The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let's go. Behold, the one who betrays me,' or the betrayer, "is approaching." This was what we covered last time. We didn't quite get to verse 42, so we'll start there today. And if this is your first time attending this webinar, let me just note that we focus much more on the act of translation, moving from Greek to English, than we do on accordance features per se, although we're in accordance the whole time, but this is more of an applied use of accordance than anything. All right, Mark 14:42, let me get accordance open. We'll just look at the Greek text. Give me a moment while I pull that open. All right, so we start with, and you can see the paragraph marker here. So we're formally beginning our passage today in verse 43, but I didn't get to this last verse last time. So we have egeristhe agomen, idou haparadidus me engiken. So we get up. So that's a present passive imperative, second person plural. Let's go. So that's first person plural. So here's a command to the group, to the disciples that are there. And then let's all of us go. So, and this is different, second person, first person, because they are not alert, they are sleeping, they are not engaged. Jesus is very engaged, as we've seen, heightened emotions, but they are all gonna go. Let's go. And then he says, behold, the betrayer, or the one who betrays me, approaches, draws near. I've translated it like this: get up, let's go. Behold, the one who betrays me is approaching. This ha para deduce, the one who betrays, the betrayer of me, or probably the one who betrays me is the way to go because of this object here. This is the continued theme of betrayal. And we are going to see this again and again today. We've already seen it in the passage, so we'll come back to this in a moment. And Giken is approaching or draws near or is coming. So this is setting the stage for what we're going to see today. And I wanted to note in translation, this seemed important to me. I saw this in France in the New International Greek Testament Commentary, and somewhere else had this too. This saying, egeristhei agomen, in another context might sound like a call to run away. And that's true in English. I mean, if you were to just translate this as, I guess the word I want is acontextually, as woodenly as possible, it would be get up, let's go. And in English, it's not clear whether that's going to or going away. But France just wants us to see that it cannot mean let's run away. Because he is saying we have repeatedly been shown that Jesus intends to go through with the events he has predicted. We can go back through Mark and see that he knows of his coming betrayal. He's predicted it even in this chapter, and he's speaking of it in terms of, if not inevitability, he's speaking of it in terms of necessity, necessity for some kind of cosmic purpose. And one that he's just prayed in the garden, not my will, but your will be done. So he is not saying let's leave. I think that I agree with France and others. I think the contextual evidence here is quite strong, and it may be so strong that you even wonder why are we even dwelling on this point. So the reason is, assuming you agree with that interpretation and have seen the same thing, we just don't want to translate this in a way that the readers could think Jesus is saying, let's get out of here before they come. And it may be that get up, let's go remains too ambiguous for that. I've translated it that way because egeristhei means get up and agomen means let's go. I mean, those are the glosses that you're going to see. So if I triple click on egero, we have wake up or rise or get up. And on agomen, that's from ago, we have, let's see, we've got a reference here. To move away from a position, to go. So if you translate them, I guess for lack of a better way of saying it, if you translate them straight up that way, that ambiguity remains. And so you just want to decide, are you okay with that? Because the rest of the passage makes it clear already to your readers, or do you want to translate a little bit more in a more specific way? Would you want to say something like, get up, let's, you'd have to add words, but something like, let's go toward them, or get up, let's face them, or let's approach them. Now that changes, that's not the verb Mark uses, so that's why I've left it this way, but that's just something you may want to consider. At either way, I think we don't want to translate it like get up, let's flee, or let's, I mean, agomen has meanings that could have to do with getting out of there, but they are in fact remaining in the situation, really kind of submitting to what's about to happen. So the prayer that has just concluded has led to his acceptance of the Father's will. France notes that, and this is probably the best way to sum it up. This is a call to advance rather than to retreat. So if you don't want to put that in your translation, I'd at least put it in the notes somewhere, just because go is such a multivalent word in English, and there's no to or from in the Greek. And so if you do a to or a from, just know that you'd be adding English words. If the clarity is worth it, you may consider that. But at any rate, it is a get up and let's go implied to them. Behold, the one who betrays me is approaching. I don't know that there's a good single English word for let's face them, or let's face the music, or let's engage, maybe something like that. But at any rate, these are action verbs, and he is calling them to action. The disciples that have been sleeping, for the third time are still sleeping. And so he's saying this to them. This was how we ended last time. The image here is Jesus came a third time. So he's standing, almost like standing over them. He's vertical there on the ground. And so he's saying, get up and let's go. The one who betrays me is approaching, and they're not going to do anything to avoid that approach. They're going to, it's almost like not just let's stay here and wait. It's almost like let's go toward them, which is interesting given what's about to happen. So that takes us to our new material for today, or actually this was new material since we didn't cover it last time, but it takes us to the next passage. Let me see what questions or comments you have. Yeah, these are great. I appreciate these. Somebody says one way to translate could be get up, let's move on. That's great. Go forth. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is just, there's so many good examples of where, like, ideally, in a perfect world, which, as we know, sadly does not exist, in a perfect world of translation, I would love to take one Greek word and render it in one English word. Now, by definition, you're not going to be able to do that because verbs in English, often the subject will be stated and the verb, that's two words, whereas English, or Greek rather, can do it in one word. But I can't think of a great one word verb for this, but I like the suggestions there. Go forth, get up, let's move on. That may be worth some brainstorming. And you may just leave it as get up, let's go. I want to use this too as an opportunity to remind us of this live click feature. Having done some work like this, we might reach a point of thinking, all right, well, what did other people do? If you go to live click and go to verse lookup, you can select the verse. I'm just clicking on the reference. Let us be going, let us go, let's go, let's go, let us be going. You don't get a whole lot of variance in these translations. Let us be on our way. All due respect to Mounts, without whom I would not know Greek, I'm not sure I would do let us be on our way, because that makes it sound like being on their way is a different way than what the betrayer is coming. So I might avoid that personally. I'm sure he's got good reasons though. But yeah, you see a lot of let us go. So I think most translators just said, you know what, let's just translate this as go, and then any further clarification is either going to already come from the context or whatever setting you're presenting your translation in. Maybe it's a Bible study and you mention it verbally. Maybe it's your own notes and you just put it in smaller font or something like that. All right, so the betrayer is approaching. Oh, and I have another quote here from Strauss. Same thing as what France says. Yeah, I just say here, just make sure you're not implying let's run away, because that's not what they're doing. All right, so verse 43, even if they wanted to run away and had started to, it wouldn't really matter for the narrative, because we get this kai euthus, edi autu laluntas, immediately, right away, while Jesus was still speaking. Well, what was he speaking? Well, it's probably this, ageris theagomen, unless he was saying something more that's not recorded. But the point here with this euthus is that almost before he can get the words out of his mouth and they can mobilize to approach Judas, Judas approaches him and comes there and gets there. So that's verse 43. I'll read it from accordance. Kai euthus edi autu laluntas paragenitai Judas Haston dodica, kai met autu aklas, meta makairon, kai zulon, paraton archiereon, kaiton grammateon, kaiton presbyteron. Left to right, it reads, and immediately while he was speaking, that refers to Jesus, paragenitai approached Judas, and then you have to flip this. Judas is actually the subject here. Judas approached, Judas, who was one of the 12, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the law experts and the elders. This is all rendered as one sentence here. It's a lot of clarifying phrases. I thought this would be a little more readable in 2 sentences. I hope we always feel free to do that. I've broken the verse into 2 sentences above because of all the modifiers. You may wish to preserve where there's a single Greek sentence, preserve it in English. It's sort of like get as word for word as you can. There are some super lengthy sentences that just work in Greek because of the way that Greek words and language work that would literally be impossible in English. This is not one of those. So if you're translating some of Paul's letters, some of those long sentences you have to split up or your reader won't understand it and it won't make sense in English. In this case, you could keep this one sentence. It would maybe be bulky, but here's how I've translated. And immediately, while Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, approached, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs. The crowd was from the high priests and law experts and elders. We have seen the genitive absolute before in Mark, autou laluntas. This is very much part of the narrative. Grammatically speaking, you could take it out and the sentence would still make sense. It's modifying something about the action. It's modifying Judas's approach, paragenetai iudas, but it's not, the laluntas is not a participle that goes with the indicative verb that goes with Judas. In other words, this is not while Judas was speaking, Judas approached. This autou, that's in the genitive, and that you got that ntas ending, os, that's also the genitive, that participle. That's different from iudas here in the nominative, which goes with paragenetai. So this is somebody else. In context makes it clear that it's Jesus. The word iestus is not in the Greek text. And so you could say immediately while he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, approached. I think that would be confusing as to who the he was. So I think bringing out explicitly that it's Jesus speaking, which we've just had here, I think that makes sense in translation. How do we understand euthus? Well, it means immediately, right away. And I wondered, how do we understand it together with the participle laluntas, speaking? Because if you just go left to right, it's and immediately while Jesus was speaking, Judas approached. And at least in my mind, the while someone was speaking and immediately, the while he was speaking sounds like more of an ongoing event and immediately sounds like a one-time event. So it's just something to think about in your translation. Do you want to bring this out more explicitly that this is some kind of interruption? Maybe this translation I've got here is just fine, but the idea with the euthus, whether you translate it this way or not, immediately while Jesus was mid-sentence, or Judas interrupted his speech just then. You've got a range of options for how you can translate this in a way that I think would be faithful to what Mark is doing in the narrative. Maybe right away Judas approached, before Jesus could even finish speaking. So just because you've got a genitive absolute and a participle there, which we typically think of verbal participles getting the ing speaking, and something like while, you could think about this as an immediately before Jesus was done speaking. Again, that's adding more English words, but it is pulling out this meaning a little bit more fully. That's one of many decisions that we are faced with as translators. I think I've mentioned this before, but especially those of you who have been to this webinar, you'll notice I tend to keep my translation pretty, I don't know if cautious is the right word, but I don't do a whole lot other than, try to stay as close to the Greek as possible, sometimes at the expense of readability when I present this box in the webinars. And I do that because I want us to see the link from Greek to English. But if I were to move away from this passage after the webinar and think about, all right, how do I put these several verses into a paragraph in the church bulletin or something like that. I might think more through these kinds of issues, you know, what really makes it readable, and still, of course, want to be faithful to the Greek text. So the crowd was from the high priests and the law experts and elders. We don't see in this verse exactly how many, but this is a delegation of the leaders. They've got Judas. We may wonder at this point in the narrative, what's the deal with this crowd? Why are they there? Jesus had predicted the betrayal. Most immediately, he kind of centered it on Judas, and so we get Judas, but there's more with Judas now, and Mark's going to go on to explain that a little bit more explicitly, what's about to happen with some background information in verse 44. Before we get there, let me just pause again and see, do you have comments or questions on anything in verse 43? On to verse 44. I'll move to accordance for this. Didoke de ha paradidus autan, suseman autois legon, han an phileso autas estin, kratesate autan, kai apagete asphalos. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one. Apprehend him and take him away under guard. I might actually start a new sentence here. Looks like I've got a comma splice there, so I might revise that or add a semicolon there. In Greek, though, that comma is there. I was following that. Didoke, the first word gives us what's going on here in the verse. If you hover over this, this is from didomi, and it's pluperfect active indicative third person singular. Now, if we are rusty on pluperfect, we'll go to Mounts. I think I mentioned I learned on his textbook, and you might just go to titles and go to pluperfect, and it will show right up. 28 verbs in the New Testament that appear as a pluperfect, a total of 86 times. He says the pluperfect is used to describe an action that was completed and whose effects are felt at a time after the completion, but before the time of the speaker. And in English, we say the betrayer had given them a sign. This had given now takes us back. Mark is already in this passage describing a past narrative. Mark is writing after the fact, but now he's going back to what was the past in the narrative's past. So in this moment that we're in Mark 14, this moment here now is past to the current narrated moment. That's what the pluperfect is. It provides background information from the past that actors in the narrative know, or at least Judas knows and the crowd knows, but readers may not know this. We get a lot of background in Mark 14 on Judas and betrayal and Jesus's awareness of it. There's lots of background there. We get background on Jesus even having a sense that it wasn't just Judas who would betray him. Lots of background. What we haven't gotten yet is this interaction. This was, in other words, not its own separate narrative. And so Mark has to, well, he doesn't have to, but he chooses to bring the readers up to speed with this background information, which is important because there's about to be a kiss in this well-known story. So I put this in parentheses. The NET does that. You don't have to, of course. The pluperfect is already telling you, and if you translate this with had given, that's already telling you that this is background information, or it's past to the current narrative of the past, so it's the past. But the parentheses might help make that even clearer to show that it's background information. Note this ha paradidus, and I'll go to accordance here, and we've got present active participle masculine singular nominative. It's from paradidomi. This is the verb of the chapter, it would seem. I think, and I think we've done this before, but I think, again, it's probably worth seeing all the uses of this word at once. And in blue in your handout, you could even just copy and paste this into any Greek text. This is the syntax to use. This is the search query, equals paradidomi bracket range mark 14 bracket. Of course, you could capitalize the mark, you could abbreviate it, but if you just copy and paste this and duplicate your tab here and put it in here, make sure it's set to Word, it will run that search. Or it should. Something didn't paste from the PDF correctly, so you might have to play with that. But here's how you do it on your own. Here's the word paradideus. Right click, search for lexeme. There it is everywhere. And now I'm just going to go to my search string and add a range. You can right click and enter command. You can also just start typing R-A-N-G-E. It comes up that way, and then mark 14. So there are the uses. I might open up a parallel English translation just to have. So we have the, so we do have Judas with the chief priest. We don't get the kiss described here, but there is that background. We get Judas looking for the opportunity. Jesus predicts it. Jesus talks about it again, and then we've had it in verse 41 just recently. Jesus talks about his betrayal into the hands of sinners, so it's more than just Judas. And then we had it in verse 42, and now again in verse 44. I thought it was interesting, and I don't know that this has to do with translation per se, but it is definitely something that I think I only saw because I was sitting so closely with this text because I was looking at the Greek. I just have glossed over this in English so much. But notice that the text, and you may have seen this already, it refers to Judas in verse 42 as the betrayer. So let's go back. So we've got ha paradideus me. So the one who betrays me approaches. Now that's Judas, that's clear. Jesus doesn't name him Judas, he refers to him as the betrayer of me, the one who betrays me. That's verse 42. Verse 43, who is approaching? Judas by name, and clarified, one of the 12. Now verse 43, same person, background information, ha paradideus, the betrayer. I think that, I wonder if this is Mark emphasizing Judas's act of betrayal in this passage. It's not to say that that's all he is and that's all he's ever been. He is still Judas, he is one of the 12, but there is what you would call an inclusio, or some people call these a Markan sandwich. He'll use these with narratives, with verses, even sometimes with stories, where there will be the one side of the sandwich, the other side, they're the same two pieces of bread, and then something in the middle. And so the Judas, one of the 12, so the emphasis could be the thing in the middle, which is, this is who is betraying him, but you get betrayer on either side. So I just think that's interesting. I just wonder about that. Maybe, you know, it could have a simpler explanation that Mark is just using stylistic variation and happened to refer to Judas as betrayer, and then Judas, one of the 12, and then betrayer again. But this stood out to me as I was preparing today. At any rate, whether this is actually an intended inclusio or sandwich or not, this betrayal theme is really present in this passage. So we see Judas, he's still got his name, he's still one of the 12, but really we're coming to know him as the betrayer. An interesting search you might think about in accordance, and this would take some experimentation and some steps, but one thing I might want to do on my own, or that you might want to do on your own, are there other named individuals, let's just say in the New Testament, who are also referred to with a nominative participle like this? So I guess we've got John the Baptizer, John the Baptist, but I would just be curious, like, are there other instances of someone who is referred to with the participle that has so much to do with who they are? I'd just be curious to see that. Maybe Mark is even the place to start. So I'd probably start by looking at the nominative participles and looking for proper names close to there. You could do a within search in accordance that might be worth thinking through if you're interested in that. All right, well, this is the betrayer, this is Judas. He had given them a sign, suseman, autois, to them, saying, so he had given them a sign and he's telling them the sign now, han an phileso, whomever I kiss, he is, or he is the one, apprehend him and take him away, asphalos. We'll look at that word in a moment. But here I've taken this phrase, we've got whom, the han is the accusative, on is ever, so whomever I kiss, that's the subjunctive, he is the one. Now, technically, it is grammatically incorrect to say that's him. We say that colloquially a lot. So, you know, depending on what your own standards are for your translation, you could say, whomever I kiss, that's him. In fact, I saw the SIL Exegetical Summary Series says whoever I kiss, which is probably a more natural way of speaking to many of us. But the I kiss takes an object pronoun, objective pronoun, so it needs to have whomever. And in the same way, we wouldn't say that is him, we would say that is he. Now, that may just sound bulky to you in translation. You could just say he is the one. But the idea here is that I'm going to kiss the one you're supposed to take away. So you could think about how you want to render that, how colloquial you want to be or not. But you've got this object. So the verb is kissing, the subject is Judas, the recipient of the kiss or the object of the kiss is Jesus. And autos, subject, esteem, that's him, or that is he, or he is, and then implied the one. Or he is he, which again just doesn't make sense in English, but it's clear that Judas is giving them this sign. So he wants them to seize him, kratesate. I want to just look at that verb briefly, triple click, see it in BDAG. We've got a few different definitions: to accomplish something by overcoming obstacles, to attain. So that's like a more metaphorical understanding. You might think about striving for a certain goal, or here we've got attain the purpose. That's not at hand here. To use one's hand to establish a close contact, just to hold. So you can just hold something, hold a book in your hand. But what we're looking at here is this meaning right here: to take control of someone or something, to seize or control. A lot of translations have arrest, and I think that's a good translation. I think I want to be sure personally to bring out this nuance of, and there's a paradox here. On the one hand, Jesus has acquiesced to what's going to happen insofar as it's the Father's will. He said, not my will, but yours be done. On the other hand, the way in which they're arresting him is this sort of unchosen, like a grabbing. There's some force implied here. Jesus's agency is compromised or overcome, or at the least disregarded, although I say that's a paradox because Jesus has made his agency clear in asserting, not my will, but yours be done. But what they are doing, apart from the Father's will, or as part of the Father's will, regardless, what they are doing is seizing him. To me, I think arrest is a good translation, but that almost, I mean, you could almost still imagine like a peaceful arrest. And in fact, I don't think this is peaceful, or I don't think it's like contact-free or whatever, because in context, we get apagete, lead him away, asphalos. And that word, which I think helps to clarify the seizing or the apprehending here, asphalos, has to do with securely. And in this case, so BDAG gives us lead away under guard. The idea is that, as I've seen commentators say, Judas, rightly or wrongly, actually wrongly as it turns out, thinks that Jesus may resist arrest. And so he's saying basically, come with your tasers. If you want to think of a modern day example, come ready for someone who's going to resist arrest and be rough with him, or you know, just grab him. I mean, this is again not a very nice sort of like you know, the authorities are explaining what they're doing to Jesus while they're doing it, like you might hope for at a doctor's physical, where they say, okay, now I'm gonna, I'm gonna feel your, I'm gonna feel for your pulse and something like that. This is not the image that we get. So I mentioned all that to say apprehend, I think, both includes arrest, but also apprehend, to me anyway, connotes this kind of seizing. Again, I would say non-consensual, but there's a paradox here because it's consensual vis-a-vis the Father, but in their mind, they're seizing Jesus, they're arresting him no matter what, and he might resist. And that's what asphalos gives us. Take him away under guard, take him away securely, take him away and be sure he doesn't get away. Those are the implications. Yeah, let me pause there. I think however you choose to translate kratesate, I think you just want to do it in a way that is consistent with this pagete asphalos, because that comes together with it, and so that helps us. That helps us to narrow down the fact that this is a physical encounter already would rule out the definition of this more metaphorical accomplishing something. But this take control or take into custody. I mean, you've got a lot of great options here, taking hold of forcibly and also without the use of force. All right, well, so that that doesn't clarify even in the definition where BDAG lists the verse. So again, I think it's this context to me that suggests this, if it isn't forceful, they're at least ready to be forceful. And indeed, as we read on, they are going to put hands on him. So whether that's violent or not, I don't think Mark is crystal clear, but there is a violent response that we won't get to today when we get the cutting off of the ear. So anyway, the point is this, I don't think Mark is portraying this as a peaceful arrest. Yeah, this is a great, here, let me just copy paste this and put this into the chat. How could a crowd mob arrest? They are not official. The verbs used are both forceful. Yeah, that's a great point. Right, almost by definition, when you get to that point, it's already so escalated that it's by force. And I think also I hear in that comment or that question, there's this question of who can lawfully arrest. And for that question, which is great. I mean, that's a great example of how historical background comes to bear on translation. I would go to a background commentary for that particular question. France usually covers stuff like this. Raymond Brown definitely will, but let me see if Keener's got anything. No, he doesn't. I won't take the time to do this now, but just to say, you could comb through your commentaries. I mean, the high priests have authority, as far as I understand, to do this, but the whole crowd there is definitely more than is needed. So another thing you could do, so I would look through your commentaries on this, but another thing you might do is go to your research search, and you might even just look at the word arrest and search it in all of your tools. I might just start there, and we won't go all the way through this right now, but I might just look at this until I find some comment on what was a typical arrest like. So we probably have a sense of the answer to that question in whatever country or state or municipality we live in this year. But to understand that biblically, I think could be helpful too. So yeah, all that's to say, great comment. Thank you. That leads to a good line of inquiry, I think. All right, so Jesus is taken away. Again, here's an unarmed guy, and armed people are taking him away. Yeah, it's definitely some escalation that doesn't need to happen, but they don't know that, or maybe they do and they don't care. All right, so that was all background. I mean, it foreshadows what's going to happen, but that was background. So now we're back to the current moment of the narrative, and that's in verse 45. Kai elthon euthus proseelthon auto lege prabi, kai kate philesin auton. And coming, or you could say approaching again, or yeah, coming immediately and going to him, he says, Rabbi, and he kissed him. We've got two participles, elthon and proseelthon, and they're both nominative. So this is not like the genitive absolute. These both go with lege, which goes with Judas. So we've got Judas, and I'll show this in the diagrams here. We've got the actor, and the diagrams show a null subject, which is to say Judas is not named now in verse 45. He's been named as the betrayer and Judas, one of the 12, and the betrayer. Now it's just he, null subject. But the main verb is lege, and he says rabbi. And so elthon and proseelthon are modifying lege as participles. I note that here. I translate them in sequence as indicative verbs, but if you wanted to preserve the ing of the participle, here's how SIL exegetical summary renders it. What we're looking at is, and having come, immediately approaching him, he says, Rabbi. Now, I think that helps me. I could almost read the Greek just off of that, or I could at least tell, oh, that's a participle, that's an indicative verb. That's great, but I don't think this reads very smoothly. It's not trying to either. This is like their interlinear, more or less, translation that they put at the top of every verse in this. So I do, as soon as he arrived, he went up to Jesus saying, Rabbi. So there's no time wasted. It's the second use of euthus. I think that also heightens the intensity of the passage, that there's some physical force and there's a lot of just, it's happening very quickly. And he kissed him, kai kate philesin auton, as promised. So there's the sign, move on my signal, and here's the signal, and then they move. I wondered as I was preparing for today, didn't we have phileo earlier? Why do we have kata phileo? We can look at those verbs one by one. So verse 44, we get the background. Here's phileso, subjunctive from phileo. That can have to do with love, affection. In this case, it has to do with a kiss as a show of affection. So it's kiss, phileo. Why did we get kata phileo here? Kata tends to serve in verbs as an intensifier. So you can see here the roots in the instant details, kata and philos, or kata phileo. You may just follow BDAG and translate it as kiss again, and just see that it's two different Greek words and do the same English word. You may also see a UBS Translator's Handbook says, as distinguished from the simple phileo of the preceding verse, kata phileo is taken to mean kiss warmly, kiss affectionately. So maybe your move is to say, all right, well, phileo was before that was kiss. I have kata phileo. So if possible, I'm not going to just say kiss. I'm going to do whatever the kata is doing. And I think both of these are good modifiers. Kiss lovingly, which is, of course, ironic because this is not a warm kiss. I mean, this is about as cold of a kiss as you would ever get, the betrayer's kiss. This is not affection. This is something like, I don't know, disdain or whatever. So there's an irony here, but that's what the word means. So I would maybe just think about, I just kept it and he kissed him, but I think in my final revision, I might give some thought to this kata. What is that intensifying prefix doing there? I think to me rhetorically, however we translate it, it's saying something in the narrative, something like, and he sealed the deal and he really went forward with it and he actually kissed him. Like this is actually going to happen now. So kata phileo, I appreciated this. Kiss warmly, kiss affectionately. I think, I didn't look at this before, but I'm guessing most translations are just going to say kiss. Yep, we've got kissed, kissed, kissed. So that kata is, and kata phileo means kiss, so it's not like they're leaving the meaning out. I would look to the New Living Translation, gave him the kiss. That's good, I like that. That's really good. So what that's doing there is, you've got a longer, I mean, you've got 5 English words for 2 Greek words, but gave him the kiss is good because it's showing that he's kissing him, but it's intensifying it and saying like, this is it, this is the kiss. I think that's a very clever way of pulling out what kata might be doing there. I actually think that's a wonderful translation. Yeah, even the message just says kiss him. That's interesting. I would have expected Eugene Peterson to pull that out more, but all right, well, that's again, one of your multiple decisions to make. So this is a very fateful kiss is the point. And now we're gonna move on to the response. So verse 44 had basically told us what was going to happen. There would be a kiss, that's the sign, and then they're to apprehend him. Here's the kiss, verse 45. Now we're going to end today with verse 46, which will be what we expect, which is the apprehension. This, by the way, is going to maybe shed light on this word that we had in verse 44. So we can revisit that. It's the same word, but again, this is just the emotional intensity, the physical intensity of this passage. I mean, it's described in a pretty high register. You've got euthus twice. You've got this kata. You've got Judas being referred to as the betrayer. I mean, this is it's high drama and tragedy. I mean, it's yeah. Anyway, there's lots of words to describe it. It's just a powerful scene that has, even though it's been predicted by Jesus, I don't think it's any less intense or vivid in Mark's telling of it. I think Mark as a storyteller is just at his best here. Here's a comment. Let me put this in the chat. Someone says, kataphileo, to kiss fully, emphatically. I like that. To overplay the action in some way as a liar, hypocrite, criminal might. Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, yeah, like an exaggerated kiss that clearly is fake. I think that's good. And I like this kiss warmly, kiss affectionately as a meaning, but again, that's really not, I mean, unless you want to do some irony here, but that's really not what the kiss is. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that comment. To kiss fully, to kiss emphatically. Yeah, I think you got to do something with that kata. I would certainly revise mine. I really like what the NLT does, but you've got some options. So I think whatever brings out the meaning that this is not just any kiss. I mean, that's really what you want to do, in my opinion, I think. Great comment. All right, let's go to verse 46. So we know what's going to happen here, but let's look at it in accordance. So we've got the kiss now, verse 46. Hoi de epebalan tas keras auto kai ekratesan auton. And they put the hands, namely their hands, on him and apprehended him. Then they put hands on him and apprehended him. Epebalan tas keras auto. Keras means hands. NET has they took hold of him, which is exactly what they're doing. And of course, how do you take hold of a person? Well, typically you use your hands unless you've got like a lasso or something, but that's not the image here. So I think took hold of him is great. The only real question I think for you is, do you want to preserve tas keras in here as such? I did here. And I think this works as a kind of metaphor in English. They put hands on him and apprehended him. I think that goes straight from Greek into English just fine. And I think the NET is right. They took hold of him. They grabbed him. You might even say they grabbed him. But the question is just, do you want to bring tas keras over from Greek into English? You certainly can, and I don't think you have to. So here's kratesate from verse 44 now becomes a kratesan. So he said, do it, Judas did, and now they're doing it. Whatever you decided in verse 44, whether it was apprehended or seized or or arrested or violently arrested or forcibly, whatever you did, I would just do it the same way here because it's the same verb. And verse 44 is the prediction, and verse 46 is the fulfillment. Now, interestingly, verse 44 had the prediction of a kiss, and the fulfillment of the kiss did not have the same verb. All the more reason to draw this out. But the prediction of the apprehension has krateo here, and then the fulfillment of it has krateo again. So the question then just becomes, can we make sure that this is consistent across the verses, because it's the same exact action. And seeing it here together now with put hands on him, that may help you with this question of, what kind of nuance do I want to bring out here? Here's on the physical force question, R.T. France says, Judas's instruction to the guards, back in verse 44, kratesate auton kai apagete asphalos, suggests that Judas expected resistance, whether from Jesus or from the other disciples. And the guards duly grab Jesus physically to prevent escape. I think grab is an excellent English word to describe this putting hands on him. They're grabbing Jesus. And by the way, as to any kind of physical response, we're going to get there, not today, because we'll wrap up. But Jesus shows no sign of resisting physically, but one of the bystanders does here. We get this described in the other Gospels too, but drew his sword and struck the high priest's slave, cutting off his ear. So in fact, there is force there. And we had the swords and clubs today already mentioned. Jesus is going to mention them again. I think the force is pretty clear in this passage, the fact that it's physically violent. And Jesus here is basically saying, why are you arresting me this way? You don't have to. So whatever Judas thought was going to happen, well, one of the bystanders here, as Mark describes him, drew his sword and struck the high priest's slave. But at least for today, we just get Jesus arrested, and he is going to speak. But it's interesting that he's not saying, why are you arresting me? Which would probably be my question if I were in that position. But he's saying, why are you doing this violently? You could have gotten me in the temple courts. And then he answers the question himself. This has happened so that the scriptures would be fulfilled. We'll need to look at that more next time. But let's stop and see. I want to leave the rest of the time for your comments and questions. And then I think next time it is probably safe to say I will at least aim to get us to the end of this passage next time. We're moving now into the trial pretty soon. So this is a very long chapter, but Mark really gives us a vivid narrative here. Here, okay, great. Another comment, let me put this here. Somebody says katabalo is to fully throw hands on, again, forcibly. Epithemi is to lay hands on, milder. Yeah, and a good resource for this would be, I'm gonna triple click this. It's gonna show it to me in BDAG, but I can switch this right over to Louw-Nida. I just need to take off the verse reference. I might wanna see this together with other words in the family, which Louw-Nida does. So let me just expand this. All right, so now we have 9 hits, and that's because this can mean different things. Events involving liquids and dry masses, that doesn't seem to be it. Let's try another one. Linear movement, careful consideration, to restrict, to control. So that may be something. Anyway, you could go through here. In fact, here's Kera. You could go through Louw-Nida and look for this word, but do it not just, it's not just a single entry. It's going to group words together that are in the same family. So you get a sense of what other words could have been used and what word was used. So I think this is interesting. Louw-Nida is the lexicon there. Any other comments or questions on this verse or anything in this passage? Let me just remind you that you can access this handout if you didn't download it here at tinyurl.com/marktranslationnotes. You can email me at abramkj@accordancebible.com. If you are here live, stay on for just a moment, just a couple of logistics that are only relevant to folks who are live. But if you're watching on the recording, I'm going to end the recording now and say thank you for joining us, and I hope that you found this useful.